Good evening. This is the I-24 News Evening Edition. I'm Lucy Alrish, and these are the headlines. The annual U.S. intelligence report. What are the biggest global threats and where do they come from? Day 6 of Syria negotiations at the Geneva II conference turned to the issue of terrorism. Each side has a different definition. On the same day, a Human Rights Watch report claims the Syrian government demolished entire villages as punishment. And SodaStream and its brand ambassador Scarlett Johansson pulled into the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Good evening again. The annual U.S. Threat Assessment Report paints a grim picture, one of a mostly unstable and unsafe world. I-24 News correspondent Charles Biblizer has more.
The world is still a dangerous place. So stresses the United States Worldwide Threat Assessment Report. For the second year in a row, the document lists cyber attacks as the most significant threat facing the U.S., saying that exploitation and disruption activities were likely to intensify as malware and attack tradecraft proliferate. Closely related is the issue of counterintelligence, which was thrust into the international spotlight this year following the largest ever leak of classified U.S. information by Edward Snowden. In his annual testimony to Congress on Wednesday, U.S. Director of National Intelligence James Clapper delivered a scathing attack on the fugitive former NSA contractor.
But what I do want to speak to, as the nation's senior intelligence officer, is the profound damage that his disclosures have caused and continue to cause. As a consequence, the nation is less safe and its people less secure.
Turning to physical threats, the report estimates that Iran has acquired the technical know-how to produce nuclear weapons at any moment, and that the Islamic Republic is currently biding time.
We judge that Iran is trying to balance conflicting objectives. It wants to improve its nuclear and missile capabilities while avoiding severe repercussions, such as a military strike or regime-threatening sanctions.
With respect to al-Qaeda, the U.S. has shifted its focus to local and regional affiliate groups, which are now set to pose the greatest risk. War-torn Syria is considered a bastion for jihadist groups, with some 7,000 foreigners from 50 countries having joined the fighting. Other threats listed in the report range from North Korea and resource scarcity to the increasing fallout caused by the Arab Spring and the global financial crisis. Consider the warning bells sounded. The challenges to global security remain formidable.
And to look closer at the annual intelligence assessment is Amir Oren, defense and government analyst at Haaretz newspaper. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. You know, the song is saying it's a small world after all, but it seems that it's an unsafe world after all.
Don't we know it from watching your newscast every night?
Yes.
One should look at this threat assessment and first of all remember that this is not a net assessment. This is not the US or Western power versus the threats, but only focusing on the threats, which is why it may sound pessimistic. When you balance it with what the other side, perhaps our side, has, the picture is a bit more optimistic. Now, Director Clapper listed, as the report now said, cyber attacks and counterintelligence, and then counterterrorism, and then counter space, because we are all dependent on space for GPS, for internet, for everything. And then, only then, he comes down to weapons of mass destruction. Because Iran, as he said, is an unpredictable actor in the international arena, but it is also a rational actor.
And it seems that it's an international problem because the unsafe things for the United States are the same like for Israel.
And for several Gulf states and Turkey and Egypt and Jordan. However, the goal has not changed. Iran is trying to pursue its power, its prestige, its regional influence. The means may change under pressure, and apparently the sanctions have been successful, which is why they felt the pressure in Iran and went to Geneva in order to gain some relief from sanctions. Of course, this is not the end of the story. However, what the U.S. intelligence agencies agree is that more transparency, more monitoring, more verification may roll back the Iranian nuclear infrastructure.
And if you need to point a finger from your professional point of view, what is the biggest threat? Is it Iran? Is it North Korea? Is it maybe Al-Qaeda, the new, let's say, the new, again, world terror that we're talking about, or the new player on the ground?
There are two orders of magnitude here. The more existential threat, if it comes forward, is the nuclear threat emanating from Iran or from North Korea, not to this region. However, this particular threat has been pushed back. And perhaps we will see it in the future, next year or perhaps later. The lesser threat, but the more prevalent one, is instability caused by regimes such as Bashar Assad's being threatened by Al-Qaeda groups and others, and a spillover, first of all, into neighboring countries such as Jordan and Lebanon. You have 2.4 million Syrians, exiled refugees, residing now in Jordan and Lebanon. And this is, of course, a destabilizing influence, and we may also see some spillover into Israel.
And of course, you will be coming here and explaining everything the rest of the year. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Lucy.
And a Human Rights Watch report published today claims that the Syrian authorities deliberately and unlawfully demolished thousands of residential buildings in Damascus and Hama in 2012 and 2013. The report cites satellite imagery with before and after photos of the locations, as well as witness statements. The 38-page report refers to 7 cases of large-scale demolition with explosives and bulldozers, and claim the purpose was not military, but rather to punish the civilians' population in those areas for their opposition support. And as this latest report on the Assad regime is released, the Geneva II talks entered their 6th day today. This time, the stated subject was terrorism, but both sides have an extremely different definition of what is. With me on set to look at what these talks have not achieved is Professor Eyal Zisar, Syria expert and senior research fellow at the Tel Aviv University. Thank you very much for coming. So, different approaches to terror?
Well, we know it from our own experience, because when it had to do with Palestinian terrorism against Israel, the Syrians were those who say, it's not terrorism, it's resistance. So, of course, clearly, when we look at, the attacks carried out by the opposition, some of them has a terrorist nature, no doubt about it. But, in this war, there are no good guys and bad guys. All are bad guys because of the brutal nature of, unfortunately, of this war. But clearly, for the regime, the opposition, to oppose the regime means terrorism. That's clear.
If we're looking at this conference, can we say that it failed?
Nobody, I think, expected seriously to achieve anything in this or during this at least first meeting. Yes, the gap is too wide. Clearly Bashar al-Assad is not ready to give up and stick to his chair. The opposition is not ready to reach any sort of compromise. I'm saying it over and over again. This battle will be decided on the battlefield, not table of the negotiation.
But when you're saying that it's going to be decided on the battlefield, it seems that it already decided. It seems that Assad's regime already won.
Well, it managed to survive. This is some sort of a victory. The wind is now on his side. The course of events clearly in his favor, but it's too close to call, as the Americans say. He's not winning. They are losing, the lack of unity within the ranks of the opposition, the failure to elect leader to appoint a military commander for the opposition, but they are not winning. It doesn't mean that he's, he may win, but clearly he lost Syria.
So, Professor Zisser, what is the future of Syria? What are we looking at?
The president will be probably Bashar al-Assad, but very little will be left of Syria as we knew it some years ago.
Professor Zisser, thank you very much for
Thank you.
In the past decade, a growing number of ex-American officials have endorsed the public campaign calling to release Jonathan Pollard, the jailed American-Israeli spy, who has been sitting in federal prison for the past 28 years. In an exclusive interview to I-24 News, former Deputy National Security Advisor Elliott Abrams, who in the past has refused to back the call for Pollard's release, supports his clemency for the first time.
I think with the passage of time, you're basically talking about 3 decades now, and it's fair to compare it to other cases of espionage. I don't think he's a hero. He took money for what he did, but the way to judge it, I think, is by the normal treatment of espionage cases, and it's hard to find one where someone, particularly in the case of a friendly country, was in prison for what's now 29 years. So I think there's a just and a humanitarian case for his release. Whether President Obama will do this is a different question. So far, he, like his predecessors, has shown no interest in this case.
And joining me in the studio is I-24 News correspondent Tal Shalev. Good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
So how significant is this Abrams endorsement to Pollard's cause?
Well, Abrams is just the last of a list that's getting longer and longer of ex-American administration and security officials that have publicly endorsed the call to release Pollard. We can name former Secretary of State George Shultz and Henry Kissinger. Just last month, former ambassadors to Israel Thomas Pickering and Samuel Lewis, in an interview to the Israeli Walla site, also endorsed this, and the list is getting longer and longer. This is not what's going to change Obama's mind. This is not what's going to change the intelligence administration current officials' mind, but it does have some significance, just because 4 years ago, in 2009, a bit more than 4 years ago, Abrams refused to back Pollard's release and said in an interview to the Jerusalem Post, quote, "There are details of this case that have always made his release problematic, and that's all I'm going to say about it." And here we heard a real open endorsement of his call, so this is significant, at least from the point of view of the Pollard's campaign.
What changed?
Well, we might say, as he said, time has passed, and maybe we can just guess that the latest NSA revelations that prompted calls in Israel to the U.S. to release Pollard, maybe that changed his mind.
And it seems that it's been, let's say, dramatic, hectic week for Benjamin Netanyahu and his own party.
Yeah, well, it seems at this point that the flare-up between Naftali Bennett and Benjamin Netanyahu has calmed down. At this point, Bennett last night, as we reported here, issued a so-called apology. Netanyahu was happy with that. Each one of them declares that they have won the battle. But if you judge by the foreign minister, Avigdor Lieberman, today he says in a tour in the Ramat HaGolan that the idea is not on the table. Settlers will not live under Palestinian rule, so probably in this case, maybe Bennett won. But Netanyahu still has a lot of mess ahead of him, and just as an example, you can see today we have thousands of right-wing demonstrators having a special prayer at the Western Wall, calling to resist John Kerry's pressure. And amongst these demonstrators are senior cabinet ministers in Netanyahu's cabinet coalition. We have Uri Ariel from the Jewish Home. We have Eli Ben-Dahan, also from the Jewish Home. And one of the MKs in the Jewish Home even said earlier today that some of Kerry's work has some anti-Semitism in it. So this is just to show that the noise is not over. And as closer as we get to the framework agreement, Netanyahu will have to choose in which voice his government speaks.
So in which which voice is his government speaks? Because what is he going to say to John Kerry?
Well, most of the people that know Netanyahu closely think that he does want to go forward with the framework agreement. He will have reservations to it, but he knows there will be a price to saying a no. And if Netanyahu is lucky, the Palestinians will refuse to it. Today, we already heard senior Palestinian official Yasser Abed-Rabo saying that the framework agreement that was presented yesterday in the New York Times is based on Israeli ideas, and they do not accept it. So we'll just have to wait and see. The ball will continue to move from one side to the other.
Sometimes I think that I don't want to be Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Thank you very much, Tal, for this. Losing Shalit, the second feature-length film made in the Gaza Strip since 2009, focuses on the 2006 capture of Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit by Hamas. It's the first of a planned three-part series of the 2006 capture. It's currently in production, and parts 2 and 3 will depict Shalit's time in captivity and his 2011 swap for over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. Although Gaza's small movie industry may struggle with amateur actors and power outage, the storyline is a winning formula for the Gazan citizens. The emphasis, the heroics from the Palestinian sides. Did I see Gilad Shalit like a woman? Okay. Qatar has decided to issue thousands of new work permits to Palestinians before the country hosts the Football World Cup in 2022. Palestinian Labor Minister said that the Emir of Qatar, Tamim ibn Hamad Al Thani, decided to issue 20,000 work visas in an effort to reduce unemployment within the West Bank. But Qatar has suffered heavy criticism regarding its treatment of migrant workers involving the construction project for the World Cup, saying laborers were receiving low pay in unlivable conditions. Tonight on the I-24 News Defense Weekly Magazine, a special edition from Cybertek 2014, the international conference and exhibition for cyber solutions that took place earlier this week in Tel Aviv. Here's an excerpt from an exclusive interview with Tzachi Stromza, the former director of a protection branch in the Israeli security agency, the Shin Bet.
This platform of sending Trojan horses by mail is very known. It's not something new, and it's also illustrate sometimes how easy it to prevent. Just don't open any email from unknown address, and you prevent without any sophisticated software or antivirus the Trojan horse. In every organization, there is difference between the core systems of the organization, whether it's operational or classified information or whatever, to the level of the net that should be as wide open as possible. And this is something that it's much harder to protect, and the damage is less, if any. But I think that in all this world of cyber, there is several layers. It's not just the real damage that happened to the organization, it's also the psychology, the feel of confidence of the people.
This and much more on the I-24 News Defense Weekly Magazine after us at 7:40 GMT. A government building in Baghdad today became the scene of a hostage situation after militants entered and took civil servants hostage. 18 people were killed as 6 suicide bombers stormed the Iraqi Ministry of Transportation building and took civil servants hostage. The attackers reportedly killed themselves before security forces were able to take control of the situation. So far, no group has claimed responsibility. Combined with other attacks in Baghdad, including 2 yesterday, the death toll so far has hit an estimated toll of between 900 and 1,000 people just this month alone. And coming up on this evening edition, as Ukraine's political crisis simmers, President Viktor Yanukovych slams the opposition. And SodaStream and its brand ambassador Scarlett Johansson pulled into the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. this and more, 2 minutes break, and I'll be back. Good evening again. Welcome back. The Ukrainian parliament yesterday passed an amnesty law allowing the release of demonstrators detained in the recent wave of anti-government protest, but not without a catch. The law will not come into effect unless protesters leave the government building they have occupied within 15 days. I24 News reporter Roni Ben-Bassat takes a look at the tensions between both sides.
What will it take for the Ukrainian protesters to finally step off the barricades? According to them, not the amnesty law passed by Parliament Wednesday night. Hours of backroom debates between opposition deputies and lawmakers loyal to President Viktor Yanukovych ended in deadlock. The two sides failed to reach an agreement, and the law was passed without the support of the opposition, which abstained from the vote. In his address to the nation on Thursday, President Yanukovych turned on the opposition and called it irresponsible for refusing to abandon the streets despite his concessions. But according to the opposition, enforcing the law as is without their support would only inflame tensions, and the only way for the demonstrations to end is by changing the country's political system.
If people get a feeling that we've already restored the constitutional law and order in the country, and we decrease the powers of the president and rebalance the power in Ukraine, so this could even somehow calm down the situation in Ukraine. If no, another surge of violence.
In Kiev's Independence Square, opposition leaders turned to their supporters who have been camped there for months. And while they didn't request them to vacate the area, they urged them to use peaceful means to attain their goals.
I am sure we should keep the truce, and I am sure that we will try and do everything possible so that blood is not spilled again, that there is no aggressive reaction.
In the last days since the fight moved to Parliament, there seemed to be less violence in the streets. All sides are calling for a truce, but the tension remains extremely high.
And joining me now on the phone from Kiev is Mr. Oleg Rubato, former head of the Secretariat of the President of Ukraine. Good evening. Thank you very much for this phone call.
Good evening.
So it looks like the government is making concessions, repealing the anti-protest law and approving an amnesty bill. Why isn't it enough?
Well, because there are 4 drafts of the law on amnesty, and opposition was offering amnesty without any prior conditions. And normally, if you are government and you're looking for the breakthrough and for consensus, you would like opposition to support your bill. But the voting yesterday was without opposition, as there were conditions attached. And therefore, from government point of view, it's a victory, but overall, it's not a step to decrease tension. And reaction from the people in the street is very negative, because they say, okay, they arrested us, now they keep us as hostages, and they have some prior conditions like you should remove barricades, you should remove, vacate administrative offices, you should close down Maidan, and then maybe in 2 weeks your peaceful colleagues would be left out of prison. So it is absolutely not acceptable. Actually, for the people.
Mr. Rybachuk, the European community seems to be on the opposition side. How much weight will that have?
Sorry, can you repeat, please?
I'm saying that the European community seems to be on the opposition side. How much weight will that have?
Well, actually, EU now is having its highest diplomat. Lady Ashton was here yesterday and today, and then Eurocommissar Syria is making a second trip, but EU tries to act as a mediator. You can't say actually that they are exactly on opposition side, but they Because my government is saying that my government would like to continue European integration.
Yes, Mr. Rubato.
And EU is natural mediator now in this process.
Yes, Mr. Rubato, thank you very much for this phone call with us. And Russian police have reportedly identified 2 alleged suicide bombers believed to be responsible for December's deadly Volgograd bombings, which killed 34 people. The 2 allegedly belonged to a military group based in the volatile Russian province of Dagestan. 2 accomplices were also detained on suspicion of assassinating the suicide bombers in traveling to the city. The bombings raised serious security concerns ahead of the upcoming Winter Olympics, set to begin in 2 weeks' time in nearby Sochi. Thailand's army is set to increase the number of troops in the capital ahead of the February 2nd election, which anti-government protesters say they will disrupt as part of their campaign to overthrow Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra. Here's a look at what has brought the country to this state and the tense atmosphere leading up to Sunday.
The protesters show no sign of stopping. Since the election was announced in November, they've ramped up their demonstrations here in Bangkok. Led by opposition heavyweight Suthep Thaugsuban, they say they'll do whatever they can to disrupt Sunday's vote.
Even though there's an election, it's invalid, as we don't want this government anymore.
There is no need to go out to vote, because after the election we will have the same government and nothing will improve.
On Sunday we will walk the streets to show our opposition to the election.
Suthep and his supporters want to postpone the ballot until reforms are put in place to combat corruption, which they say is rampant and which guarantees victory for current Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra and her Pheu Thai party. The elite-backed main opposition party, the Democrats, which has not won an election in nearly 20 years, is boycotting the vote.
A reform process needs to be initiated so that people can be confident that come election time and after the elections, an elected government does not abuse power in the way that it has done over the last couple of years.
Even if they were to stand, it's unlikely the Democrats would win, as Yingluck's party remains hugely popular, especially in the rural north. And some analysts believe that after Sunday's vote, the 2 sides will come together to discuss reforms that could help end the stalemate.
The Pheu Thai government came to power in 2011 on the ticket that they wanted to reform the country. That's why they asked for an amendment of the constitution, or a new constitution. Suthep's people, PDRC, also asked for reform. So the issue is, I would say that there's a commonality there.
Last Sunday, during early voting, thousands of voters were blocked from polling stations across Bangkok and parts of the south. And the Electoral Commission says if the same thing happens this Sunday, the official result might take months to come through.
Amanda Knox, an American former student who was charged in the murder of her roommate Meredith Kirschner and then acquitted in high court in Italy, is expecting another verdict today in her case based on new evidence. The final verdict is expected at 7 p.m. GMT time. Will Foxy Knoxy end up in Italian jail after all? I24 News reporter Uli Shapira has more.
The Italian press called her Foxy Knoxy. Today, the beautiful student from Seattle and her ex-boyfriend Raffaello Solecito are waiting once again for a verdict from the Italian court that might send her back to jail for the murder of her former roommate Meredith Kirschner.
I expect Amanda to be convicted. Amanda has a part to play in all of this. I am sure that she is involved in the death of poor Meredith.
The saga began in 2007 when 21-year-old Kirschner was found dead with her throat cut in the house she shared with Knox. Amanda was quickly arrested and ended up spending 4 years in jail until the Italian court found her guilty. But the country's Supreme Court overturned the pair's verdict and Amanda came back home, surrounded by the glory of victory.
What's important for me to say is just thank you to everyone who's believed in me, who's defended me, who's supported my family.
Amanda became a sensation in America and in the entire world, her story becoming an inspiration for many movies of the week. But the story took a sharp turn in September when an Italian court made an unprecedented decision based on new evidence of Knox's DNA found on Meredith's bra clasps, to hold a retrial. Now Knox, who wasn't physically present in court during the trial, is waiting impatiently for the results.
Well, we're hearing from Seattle that Amanda Knox is very nervous. The people she's talked to, the people the interviews she's given and things like that indicate that she is very well aware of the seriousness of this decision today.
Even if Amanda and solicitor will be found guilty today, the story is far from being over. The prosecution will likely have to wait for an appeal and another several months for a final verdict. And even then, no one can be sure that the US would extradite her back to Italy. In either case, a sequel is on its way.
And back to Israel and Hollywood. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has reached Hollywood when the famous actress Scarlett Johansson decided to quit her role as an ambassador for the aid agency Oxfam over her support for an Israeli company that operates in the West Bank. I-24 News correspondent Shahal Peled has more on this real-life drama.
Like most actors, my real job is saving the world.
An 8-year relationship between Hollywood actress Scarlett Johansson and the humanitarian group Oxfam International came to an end today. The 29-year-old Jewish actress made her decision after being criticized over her support for SodaStream, an Israeli company which operates in the West Bank.
I never intended on being the face of any social or political movement, distinction, separation, or stance as part of my affiliation with SodaStream. SodaStream is a company that is not only committed to the environment, but to building a bridge to peace between Israel and Palestine.
SodaStream International is an Israeli company whose main factory is based in Ma'ale Adumim, an Israeli city in the West Bank, a territory captured by Israel in 1967 and still claimed by the Palestinians.
This factory is located on annexed and occupied Palestinian land. This is a settlement, and settlements are in violation of international law and legitimacy. This factory is set up on land stolen by force. If they want to set up bridges for peace, why don't they establish this factory in Israel and then employ Palestinian workers?
Johansson joined SodaStream earlier this month as its first global brand ambassador, and she's set to appear in an ad for the home carbonation system during the prestigious halftime slot of this Sunday's Super Bowl. Although serving as a global ambassador for Oxfam since 2007, raising funds and promoting awareness to global poverty, the actress was criticized by the Aid and Development Agency, which believes the Israeli settlements are illegal.
Ms. Johansson's role promoting the company SodaStream is incompatible with her role as an Oxfam global ambassador. Oxfam believes that businesses such as SodaStream that operate in settlements further the ongoing poverty and denial of rights of the Palestinian communities that we work to support.
After coming under fire from pro-Palestinian activists, the Israeli company seems to be marking a victory, with the Hollywood star standing by its side.
And joining me tonight in the studio is Ilan Nakash, Chief Marketing Officer of SodaStream. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So what is your reaction to Scarlett Johansson leaving Oxfam?
Look, that's, there's been a lot of messages publicized everywhere about this, so I wouldn't want to elaborate too much, but as you can imagine, of course, we support and stand by her side in every decision that she's making in this topic.
Were you in any contact with her?
We're, of course, always with contact, but in the end, she makes her own decision on this matter.
Will you be continuing with your plans of broadcasting the full commercial?
In the Super Bowl, yes, we're intending, of course, to be on the Super Bowl on Sunday evening, but these are two completely unrelated topics because the controversy around rejected advertising in the US has nothing to do with the controversy that you might have seen around Scarlett Johansson collaboration with Oxfam.
Were you expecting this reaction all around the world?
I mean, we've always
because this is good marketing.
Yeah, but we've always seen some criticism of SodaStream for the plant where we operate in Mishor Adumim, but not to that extent. But for us, we will continue to be proud of this plant because that's a plant where Israelis and Palestinians are working together, are celebrating their success, are celebrating their respective traditions and holidays, and where we think that this is a great experiment for what could peace look like in the Middle East.
So you're actually looking at it, at the whole situation in a positive way, and in order to show the world that actually, although this plant is in, let's say, occupied territory, still Arabs and Jews are working together.
Arabs and Jews are working together there. We employ 950 Palestinians in our plant. And, anybody is invited to come and see and talk to them. And they receive the same salaries as Israelis, the same benefits, and they, make subsistence for their families. And we have a moral obligations for those employees. And if we were leaving or shutting down the plant today, what would we do? Fire 950 people?
So let's try to think about it. I want to understand where all the products, you're selling all the products outside of Israel, of course. If this boycotting will continue, will you consider to change the place of the plant?
That's something I cannot comment on. But our goal is that people recognize that what we're doing in that plant is actually more than manufacturing soda makers. It's also preparing the peace of the people between Israeli and Palestinian.
The Arab who are working in your fabric, where do they come from?
Some of them come from the Palestinian Authority. Some of them come from Jerusalem, and we have as well Jews. We have coming from anywhere in Israel. We have a lot of different communities living there, coexisting, working together.
Do they know about this whole scandal?
Yeah, of course.
And what are the reactions that they're having?
That you're invited to come and talk to some employees at the plant, and you'll see. They are very excited to actually have Scarlett doing a commercial for SodaStream, and that's going to play during the Super Bowl.
We will come. Ilan Nakash, thank you very much for this.
Thank you.
Yes, and Michael Schumacher's agent confirmed today the former Formula One champ is being gradually lifted from his medically induced coma. According to his manager's statement, quote, Michael's sedation is being reduced in order to allow the start of the waking up process. But he says the process may take a while. Schumacher has been in a coma since he injured his head in a skiing accident in the French Alps over a month ago. And goodbye to the snake and welcome to the horse. For more than 1 billion people worldwide, the true start of the year arrives on January 31st, the Chinese New Year, with the coming year of the horse, the wooden horse to be precise. Around the world, the celebrations centering around food and family, with traditions designed to attract luck and fortune. Still ahead on this I-24 News Evening Edition. The daily debate. Why is assimilation still a contested issue in Israeli society in 2014? And on One with former Deputy National Security Advisor Elliott Abrams.